You know, this transgender situation is just plain stupid. I mean, for the number of people that this actually involves, it's it's a little ridiculous. And you know, I've said it before. This is a law in search of a problem, because the people that are against this particular situation, they really can't point to anything that or any problem that has occurred on even a minor scale in relation to the transgender community. Now, I have one question. If a male who has transitioned to female and has the surgery necessary in order to be anatomically correct walks into a restroom and someone challenges them, I guess security, I don't even know how they're going to enforce this, but someone happens to challenge them and they ask to see their birth certificate. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that they actually have their birth certificate with them. And the birth certificate says male. But they have the, again, anatomic features of a female, all of them. Are they in trouble? Can they be arrested? If that's in fact the case, then my question is, what happens when that same person walks into a male bathroom and there's been no answer given by anyone that I have seen thus far, either on Fox, CNN, or MSNBC? And various people who are on the pro-law side of this, i.e. Against transgenders using a bathroom of their identity, they he and haw about that particular question left and right. Now, again, if it's a female that identifies as a male walking into a male bathroom, you know, I have the same question, because if they walk into a female bathroom and they are really female, but they're transitioning to male, women should be screaming blue murder that there's a man in the restroom. But at the same time, if they walk into a men's room and for whatever reason they are identified as transgender, you know, they may have a problem, either merely by ridicule or by physical action being taken against them. So, you know, it's an issue because it's being made an issue. Most people really don't pay a lot of attention to, and I'm saying in a men's room because I really haven't frequented ladies' rooms, but in the men's room, I really don't pay too much attention to the guy using the restroom, you know, because normally, you know, if it's a guy using a urinal, well, obviously you don't think there's going to be a problem. But if it's a guy that walks into a stall, you don't know what the hell, you know, that person is, you know, sitting in the stall. You know, he could be doing a number two, which is normally what you go into a stall for, or it could be a transgender identified as male, you know, doing number one. So anyway, I'm going to play this clip, and then we're going to see the governor of, well, I'm sorry, the lieutenant governor of Texas jumping up and down about this.
But no matter how isolated, no matter how afraid, and no matter how alone you may feel today, know this, that the Department of Justice, and indeed the entire Obama administration, want you to know that we see you, we stand with you, and we will do everything we can to protect you going forward.
Just days after Attorney General Loretta Lynch gave what is by far the most sweeping defense of equal rights for transgender people in the history of the American federal government, in a speech announcing the Justice Department would be countersuing to keep the North Carolina transgender bathroom law from going into effect, the Obama administration today took another big stance for transgender rights, sending a letter to every public school district in America warning them they should allow transgender students to use bathrooms consistent with their chosen gender identity or risk losing federal funding. Many conservatives expressed outrage over the transgender directive to public schools, with a chorus led by Texas Lieutenant Governor and former conservative talk show host Dan Patrick, who earlier this week called for the resignation of the superintendent of the Fort Worth Independent School District over guidelines which stipulated that students must have access to restrooms consistent with the gender identity each student consistently and uniformly asserts.
Now, that is reasonable. I mean, I don't understand what's so unreasonable about this. And, leave it to Texas. It's always these assholes here in Texas, and they're, the Republicans that basically want to jump up and down about anything that I guess is against their sensibilities and even common sense. So, leave it to, Texas, and I'm going to just throw a blanket out on this. All these southern states that have their governors and legislatures controlled by Republicans, these are all the assholes that they cannot deal with change. They can't deal with anything that's different. If it's different to them, it's anathema. And I just don't understand it, because they're basically this has been going on for years as far as transgender people using the bathroom that they identify with. And I'm going to say this again, they can't come up with an instance where it's been a problem. And, and I'm basically just looking for a couple. There may somewhere be one, just one. But, as far as creating a law for one instance is ridiculous. Now, as far as, a guy sneaking into restrooms, I've seen that, basically all over the place. Okay, but there are laws that can be used for that particular instance. But as far as a person who is truly a transgender person, you don't see any problems. You really just don't.
Patrick this morning claimed the president was seeking to blackmail Texas over a policy he cast as one that forced boys and girls to shower together.
I believe it is the biggest issue facing families and schools in America since prayer was taken out of public schools.
Now, this guy just went and attacked the Fort Worth School District, which is not that far from where I live here in Texas. And they have a solution, and they implemented a solution for this particular situation. And this guy, he can't even work with somebody who's got a solution. Any solution to the problem that's reasonable, they can't see it. It's either their way or the highway. And what's going to end up happening is, in North Carolina, that's going to go to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which transgender lawsuits have already been won by transgender people. So North Carolina is going to lose. They're going to lose. And they know damn well that it makes no sense for them to appeal it to the Supreme Court at this time, because the Supreme Court is going to be split more than likely 4-4, which allows the lower court rulings to stand. Now, the problem with Texas, if they sue, their Court of Appeals is controlled by conservative judges, so that they may be able to prevail against this particular executive action issued by Obama. Because again, if it goes to the Supreme Court 4-4, once that fifth judge is placed on the Supreme Court, then this whole thing is going to get resolved. And my feeling is it's going to probably get resolved in favor of the transgender people. All right. And all of this is coming down because of the Supreme Court ruling allowing gay marriage. So they had nobody to attack on that. They had to follow the Supreme Court ruling. So now they're looking at going after an even smaller class, the transgender class, and I really don't even know for what reason. I mean, why don't they just leave these people alone? You know, if they're so Christian, you know, Jesus said, live and let live. But for some reason, that's one of the edicts of Christianity that they, for some reason, don't seem to follow. They also don't follow the edicts of let the people decide. They believe that they know better than their own constituents. Anyway, I'm going to play the balance of this particular segment.
Right after this, my very contentious interview with Dan Patrick on this very issue. You don't want to miss it.
Okay, here's the interview with the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. And this guy is a real prick.
A short time ago, I had a somewhat heated conversation with Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who earlier today vowed to forego federal funding for low-income Texas students if that's what it took to defy an Obama administration directive that school districts allow transgender students to use bathrooms consistent with their chosen gender identity.
I believe you're going to see an explosion of homeschools if this prevails. Parents are going to look for private schools. Parents are not going to send their 14-year-old daughters into the shower to the bathroom with 14-year-old boys. It's not going to happen.
I just want to start making sure that everyone's understanding each other about what does the term mean to you? When you're transgender, what does that mean to you, Lieutenant Governor?
Well, Chris, I'm explaining it to you because the interpretation that the Obama administration has is that they see transgender as someone who perceives that they are of a different sex. Maybe they want it. It depends on what part of the transition you're talking about, Chris, by the way. Someone goes through a transition possibly. They may already have done the transition. You don't know that. Someone may be thinking they're another sex. So Title IX is about the sex that you were when you were born. And what Loretta Lynch and the Obama administration, the superintendent, are talking about is they see a transgender person it's the sex they would either like to be or believe they are. And Title IX doesn't cover a transgender. Title IX talks about the sex that you are. So transgender, which is about 0.3% of the population, and no one knows for sure, but it's very small, are people who are born of one sex that either want to be, feel they are. It depends. I can't give you the definition for every transgender person. So there's your answer to the question.
But let me ask you this. So sure. People that are born biologically to a certain sex and feel identified strongly with a different gender than that biological sex. My question to you is,
yes.
Just starting with that, do you think that is a genuine phenomenon and there are people that genuinely feel that? Or do you think this is essentially a fabricated issue?
No. I don't think it's a fabricated issue, Chris. First of all, and just so you know a little bit about me as chair of education in the state, we make accommodations for lots of students for lots of reasons. We have 6 million students in Texas schools. And so if a child however you want to define it, wherever they are, and particularly with a child, whether they're 8 or 14, it may be difficult to tell. I assume they're being sincere. I have to take them at their word that they're sincere about that. And we make accommodations today, Chris, for them. Our schools figure this out.
What percentage of complaints in the state of Texas or in Fort Worth, what percentage of complaints that come from students and parents initiate due to this specific issue that you have now devoted so much time to? What percentage of those?
Chris, I just feel you're kind of hostile to the issue. I'm just having a discussion here with you. You don't have to kind of take me on. I'm just answering questions, trying to explain why this is so damaging. Chris, here's the deal.
You seem very committed to this issue, and I would like to know what percentage of those complaints originate from this.
Chris, what complaints have we had from transgender students that they need to actually have to go in the bathroom with a girl or with a boy if it's the other way around? Here's the bottom line, Chris. This creates total chaos in the schools. You're going to have 8-year-old girls who are going to go home and say, Mom, I don't want to be in that bathroom with that boy, or a 15-year-old girl. I don't want that boy coming in and playing on our basketball team and showering with us, because this is what it would allow. So you don't change the whole school system. You don't go against the values.
So what do you do?
I'm a grandfather and a father. Well, and I don't want my kids or grandkids commingling in the bathroom or the shower, and I think most don't. And we're not going to let Barack Obama blackmail us with 30 pieces of silver and threaten to take away our funding. If he wants to do that, that's going to be his call. And by the way, Chris, this is what Obama doesn't even understand. He says he's going to threaten to take away our money, which is about $10 billion in Texas over 2 years. Most of that money is for reduced lunch, free and reduced lunch and breakfast. So the poorest of the poor would lose their federal nutrition program because the president is unhappy with the school that doesn't follow his mandate.
So then what is the solution?
Here, the solution is what is happening today in America. First of all, Chris, the president has no business in the schoolhouse.
The solution?
So you leave it up to the parents.
Asking you, what's the solution? Okay. What's the solution?
Chris, I'm answering your question. First of all, you leave it up to the parents of the community. You leave it up to the elected school board. You leave it up to the superintendent. The mistake that the Fort Worth superintendent made, he didn't talk to the parents. He didn't have any hearings.
You wouldn't leave it up to the superintendent, though. When it was up to the superintendent, you intervened against the superintendent.
Chris, calm down. Look, Chris, the point I'm making is local control is when people actually get a chance to vote and have their voice heard. The superintendent did not take it to the board. There was no vote. The people never testified on it. Had they would have rejected.
Substantively.
Okay. So here's the answer, Chris.
What is the solution?
So the solution is what Keller ISD and school districts are doing all over the country. For any child, whether it's a child who may be dyslexic or have a disability or has a nutrition issue or can't eat certain food in the cafeteria, I can go down the list, who is partially blind. In a school system as big as we have, there are all kinds of students who have special needs. And schools make accommodation. They don't turn the whole school upside down. They say, okay,
they should go to a separate bathroom.
So they can go to a separate bathroom, absolutely. And the president in his guidelines, by the way, say that's good enough. The president says that's not good enough, that separate bathrooms don't matter.
I understand that there are parents who genuinely 1,000% feel your view. They may be the majority of the parents in Fort Worth. They may be the majority of parents in Texas. They may be the majority of parents in America.
Yeah,
I'm a parent
like,
myself
probably
with 2
like
children.
90%.
I don't feel that way. I'm a parent of 2 children.
Well, you're the 20% that doesn't. You're the 20%.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you this? So put yourself in the position of being one of those children or the parents of them. And I want to ask, what have you learned from all your conversations with trans students and trans parents and trans teachers? What have you learned from all those conversations about their concerns?
Sure. Let me tell you what. I've been on the board of a charity for children with disabilities in schools since 1988. I have been in the Senate, on the Senate Education Committee for 8 years. I was chair of education, and now I'm lieutenant governor. And the truth is, I've never had a transgender parent or student until this week ever contact me personally about an issue or that they had a problem that I ever recall. It has not been an issue. It is, again, maybe 0.3%. Many schools may not have any transgender students.
Talking to them.
Well, no, Chris, no. I come to this position without it ever being an issue from anyone. And I have talked to transgender. I'm just saying no one's brought it up as an issue. Schools have dealt with it. Parents have dealt with it. They've kept it private. They haven't made an issue. So I have a lot of experience with this, Chris, more than you do, more than Josh Earnest does, more than Barack Obama does. And here's what I know. School decisions and community decisions are left to the parents and left to the school board. It's not to be controlled by the President of the United States. We're not going to take his 30 pieces of silver and have him take over the students in our state and take over the children across this country. It is not right, Chris. If you can't get this paid, now, I respect you may have a different view, but if you can't understand that 70 to 80% of the parents don't want a 14-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl showering together, or don't want boys in the girls' room or girls in the boys' room, if you can't understand that, that's fine, but at least respect the fact that an overwhelming majority of Americans don't agree with this policy. And the president, this is the biggest issue for public schools and parents since they took prayer to public schools. It's a big issue, Chris, and it's just the reality. It's going to be a big issue in the presidential campaign, by the way. Hillary supports it, Trump doesn't. This probably will cost Hillary the election.
I would respectfully submit that there might be bigger issues in education. Texas Lieutenant Governor.
There's no bigger issue. There's no bigger issue when you tell a parent how their child should be educated.
Thank you, sir. If you want to watch the full 12 minutes of my interview with Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, It's up on our website, and I want to thank him for the extended conversation. It was excellent to have that exchange.
Now, this guy is ranting and raving, okay, but, and I'm coming back to exactly what I said, not one single issue. No one's come to him complaining about a boy using a quote-unquote transgender male using a female restroom. These guys are all making stuff up in order to jump up and down. And if and when, okay, and this is going to happen, and now he's going to make a big deal about the money's coming down into the Texas schools that are going to be, I guess, taken away or withheld, and how it's going to harm everybody else. This is your action. If you had just shut your mouth and waited for complaints to come and then addressed the issue, it would have been a different story. But even you have attacked one of your own school districts, Fort Worth, where they were being proactive about the situation, and for what? There have been no complaints. So when you can actually show complaints, and I'm not talking about like, you know, one or two totally right-wing nuts coming in there, but actual sufficient number of complaints in order to justify your position, let me know. Okay, now here's Wendy Davis. She was a former state senator from Texas. She ran for governor and lost to Abbott. And this is more than likely, and I haven't seen this before, more than likely going to be the other side of this argument, that the lieutenant governor was basically unwilling to listen to or to consider.
And gubernatorial candidate Wendy Davis, who hails from Fort Worth. And I wanted to have you on because I'm curious how this is playing in Texas right now, because I get the sense from talking to Lieutenant Governor Patrick, from Ted Cruz's campaign trail rhetoric, that conservatives, A, believe what they're saying at first order, but also think they've got a winning political issue in their hands right now. Is that the sense you get?
I think it's much more the latter than the former, Chris. They feel like they've got a winning political issue on their hands. And I found it just so striking today to see Dan Patrick get up and grandstand in the news conference that he held, talking about those 30 pieces of silver and the intrusions of the federal government. We have some real problems here in Texas. We have a dramatically underfunded school system here. We lost a little girl not long ago in Grand Prairie because our Child Protective Services is so dramatically underfunded. The Texas legislature cut $400 million from disabled children receiving therapeutic services. You didn't see Dan Patrick stand up and hold a news conference on any of those issues because he was a part of all of that underfunding and supporting that underfunding. If he really cared about children in this state, those are the things that he'd be talking about. They've picked what they believe is a hot political issue, and they're going to drive it as far as they can.
Did you say $400 million they cut?
Yes.
That's a lot of money.
Yes. It was a tremendous amount of money, and there was a huge backlash from the parents of these students who were receiving those services in Texas, the children who were receiving those services, and still that went forward. There's a lawsuit going on about it right now. So when he gets up, and I know him very, very well, I served with him for a number of years, I know that he is very good at capturing the camera when he believes he has an issue that will be politically beneficial to him, and that's what this is all about. But Chris, I've read that letter. The letter from the Obama administration was a letter clarifying, because so many school districts were seeking clarification on this issue, what the requirements of Title IX are. And yes, Title IX, if it is violated, there can be a consequence of school funding. But there was nothing in the letter that talked about or threatened to remove funding from schools based on the clarification that the letter provided. It simply laid out what the law was under Title IX, and that this kind of discrimination cannot be had. And there was guidance given to school districts on what Title IX would require them to do for students based on their own gender identity, no differently than they would have to comply with Title IX based on not discriminating in a girls' sports program, for example. That's why Title IX exists, and the Obama administration is within its rights to interpret it and to provide guidance to school districts, particularly because so many of them have been asking for that guidance.
You know, it strikes me that one of the things that's been glossed over is that in the policy of the Fort Worth School District, where you hail from and where the Lieutenant Governor has seen fit to intervene, the policy is the gender identity that the student consistently and uniformly identifies, which is to say this idea that has been conjured of essentially some tricksterism, of some predatory fakery to get into the opposite gender bathroom is itself not germane to what the policy says.
Exactly. What they know is that they're playing on fear, right? And they know that that's been a successful strategy. We saw it happen in Houston with the defeat of an ordinance to protect sexual orientation identity and transgender identity there. And they're trying the same thing here because they know it's a winning message.
Wendy Davis, thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, so that gives you the other side of the situation. And like I said, that Lieutenant Governor's a prick. You know, he's jumping up and down about this issue, which there are bigger issues here in Texas as far as the educational system is concerned. There are multiple lawsuits going on regarding the funding of the Texas system. And one of the cases has been decided, and it was decided against these various school districts who were suing in order to try not just to get back that $400 million in funds for special needs students, but their budgets were also severely cut. And the school districts were suing, saying that those cuts brought the level of funding down to unconstitutional levels. And this prick of a Republican-leaning judge sided with the state in that particular case. So it's basically the haves and the have-nots more so than anything else. And until the people of Texas wake up and realize that they're getting screwed by these right-wing politicians, things are not going to change. Now, I'm assuming that there are going to be lawsuits over this going back and forth. And my assumption is that the Department of Justice is probably going to get drawn in to, I guess, I don't know if you call it a class action, but a state action lawsuit with Texas, Mississippi, Arkansas, and probably Alabama, North Carolina, and all of these southern GOP-controlled states are all going to jump in on this. And I'm hoping that this gets played out in the Fourth Circuit, because if that is in fact the case, they're going to lose. And as long as there's only 8 justices on the Supreme Court, it's basically going to become the law of the land until that 9th justice gets appointed, and then they'll be right back in there, depending on the who appoints a justice, in order to replead their case.